Help me hit 1,000 subscribers, support the video with a like and share your thoughts in the comments. I read everyone, thank you. I used to think my husband, Ethan, was impossible to embarrass. He was the kind of man who danced in grocery store aisles, made children laugh in waiting rooms, and turned even the dullest moments into ridiculous jokes. His silliness was the glue of our marriage, lighthearted, goofy, pure. So when my friends suggested a prank during our weekend cabin trip, it felt harmless. Just a silly joke for a silly man. The idea was simple: we would drive off, leaving him behind for a few minutes, then circle back while filming his reaction. We imagined he'd laugh, maybe pretend to hitchhike dramatically, or chase the car with exaggerated slow-motion running. Ethan loved pranks more than anyone I knew. It felt in character, funny, innocent, just another moment we'd laugh about years later. But I didn't know that morning had already carved something heavy into him. We were loading the car when the first sign appeared: a tiredness in his eyes, a stiffness in his smile. I asked if he was all right, but he brushed it off with a soft, "Just didn't sleep well, love." I didn't push. I should have. As we drove toward the trail area, the sky grew thick with gray clouds, wind brushing through the trees like restless whispers. The trip felt peaceful. Ethan cracked jokes in the back seat, playing with the leaves he collected from the ground while stretching his legs. Everything felt normal, almost. When we arrived at the clearing, he wandered off to take pictures near the ridge. That was when my friend Leah nudged me, camera in hand, excitement sparking in her eyes. "This is perfect. Let's do it now." I hesitated for a second, Ethan looking small and alone in the wide open space, but then I remembered his endless jokes, the way he'd always ended the night laughing at himself. So I agreed. We climbed back into the car, trying not to giggle. I looked back at him one last time. He stood with his back turned, hair fluttering in the wind, completely unaware. The engine hummed, tires crunching on gravel as we rolled away slowly. But when he finally turned and saw us leaving, he didn't smile. He didn't raise his hand in mock betrayal or pretend to collapse dramatically. He just stood there, frozen. "That's weird," Leah whispered. "He usually..." I shushed her. He looked hollow. I tried to tell myself he was just acting differently this time. But the stillness in his posture made my stomach twist. We drove down the path for less than a minute before guilt gnawed too deeply. "Turn back," I said abruptly. "This doesn't feel right." Leah nodded and reversed onto the narrow track, the trees bending inward like they too sensed something off. We hurried back to the clearing, expecting to see him standing exactly where we left him. But he wasn't there. At first, we thought he was hiding, classic Ethan. Maybe behind the trees, or crouched in the bushes, waiting to jump out with a laugh. We called his name, pretending to sound scared, expecting him to burst out dramatically. But silence answered us. The clearing suddenly felt far too large. Far too quiet. My voice cracked as I shouted his name again. Nothing. No rustle of leaves, no footsteps, no playful laugh. Then I saw it, his phone lying face down near the rock he had been standing on. Ethan never went anywhere without his phone. The world tilted slightly as I picked it up, my hands trembling. Maybe he wandered down the trail? Leah suggested weakly. No. He wouldn't just walk off like that. A wind swept through, cold and sharp, sending a shiver through my spine. Something felt wrong, deeply, terribly wrong. We split up, scanning the edges of the clearing, calling out until our voices grew strained. Minutes stretched painfully. My heartbeat pounded louder than the rustling leaves. Then, just as panic began to swallow me whole, I heard it, distant footsteps approaching from the tree line behind us. Heavy, uneven, dragging slightly. My breath hitched. "Ethan?" I whispered. But the figure emerging from between the trees wasn't walking the way he usually did. His posture was stiff, his clothes wet, his hands trembling. And his face. His face held no hint of the playful man I knew. He looked like someone who had seen something he couldn't unsee. Something that had changed him. Something that made my silly prank suddenly feel like the worst mistake of my life. His eyes lifted slowly to meet mine, haunted, wounded, and full of something I had never seen in him before. Fear. I stumbled toward him, my hands reaching out as if I could physically pull the weight of whatever had happened from his shoulders. Ethan. What happened? I barely breathed the words. He took a step back, raising his hands in a slow, almost apologetic gesture. I shouldn't have let you leave me alone, he murmured, his voice low, breaking somewhere it had never broken before. I thought it was just a joke. I thought I could handle it. Handle what? I asked, confusion and panic mingling. Ethan, talk to me. He shook his head, looking down at the muddy ground, his boots sinking slightly into the damp soil. Someone. I saw something out there. Leah, who had been filming the initial prank, finally caught up, camera forgotten, her mouth open in disbelief. Saw what? She asked, voice trembling. Ethan's eyes flickered between us, and for the first time I saw him truly afraid. Not the playful, mischievous fear he sometimes displayed when telling a ghost story or sneaking into a stranger's yard. This was pure, unfiltered dread. I can't explain it, he said finally, voice quivering. It wasn't human. At least, not entirely. It moved too fast, too silent. I ran. I didn't know what else to do. And when I stopped, it was gone. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to shake him and tell him he was being ridiculous. But the pallor of his skin, the wet streaks from rain or sweat, or both, told me this was no joke. Something had happened. Something real. I grabbed his arm, urging him toward the car. Come on. You're safe now. We're right here. He followed silently, walking stiffly, as if each step required more effort than the last. The forest behind us seemed to whisper in agreement, the wind cutting through the branches with a voice that almost sounded like a warning. Once inside the car, I finally had a chance to look at him properly. His usual sparkling eyes were dulled, dark circles shadowing the edges. His lips pressed together in a way I'd never seen before, tight, controlled, almost afraid of giving away too much. I thought I lost you, I whispered, gripping his hand across the console. I was only trying to make you laugh. He shook his head, a small, bitter smile flickering but not reaching his eyes. You left me miles away, he said softly, and I was alone. That's when it came. I can't describe it properly. Only that I felt hunted. Leah swallowed audibly. Hunted? By what? Ethan didn't answer, staring out the fogged-up window, hands clenched tightly in his lap. I could feel the tension radiating off him, cold and heavy. The prank we intended as harmless laughter had twisted into something dark, something we couldn't easily undo. We drove back to the cabin in silence, broken only by the occasional shiver of wind or a snapping twig somewhere in the forest. When we arrived, Ethan didn't jump out with his usual grin, didn't laugh at how ridiculous we had been. He just sat there, still wet, still shaken, staring at the ground like it held the answers he was too scared to voice. I stayed close, my arm brushing his shoulder as we entered the cabin. Warmth hit us immediately, a fireplace, wood smoke, the smell of old books and pine, but it didn't touch him. His body trembled as he sank onto the couch, burying his face in his hands. For the first time, I realized how fragile our assumptions can be. How a single moment, a single decision, can ripple into something that changes everything. Ethan's usual resilience, his boundless energy, his capacity for laughter, they hadn't vanished. They were buried beneath something heavier, something we hadn't prepared for. Hours passed. He didn't talk much. He didn't make jokes. He just sat there, staring at the flickering flames, trying to make sense of whatever he had seen. I wanted to reach out, to tell him it was okay, that we wouldn't have left him like that if we'd known. But words felt empty, powerless against the weight pressing down on him. Finally, when the first stars peeked through the clouds outside, he spoke again. I think I think I needed to be reminded that even when you're silly, even when you joke, life can hit you in ways you don't expect. He looked at me then, his eyes finally clear but still haunted. And sometimes, it's the moments you least expect that teach you what really matters. I nodded, my heart aching. I'm sorry, Ethan. I didn't know. He smiled faintly, almost painfully. I know. And I shouldn't have walked away either. I should have told you how tired I was, how uneasy I felt. His voice was steadier now, softer, tinged with vulnerability and honesty. We learn, I guess. Even from pranks. And in that moment, I understood something crucial. Our marriage wasn't built on pranks or laughter alone. It was built on trust, on honesty, on the willingness to be vulnerable, even when it scared us. And as Ethan leaned back, finally allowing himself to breathe again, I realized that the return from his miles of solitude wasn't just a lesson in fear, it was a lesson in love. We had laughed, we had teased, we had joked endlessly over the years. But that night, sitting together by the fire, I knew something deeper had shifted. The silliness that had defined us was still there, yes, but it now lived side by side with an unspoken understanding that even in the silliest moments, life can surprise you, humble you, and remind you what matters most. Ethan's hand found mine across the couch. I held it tightly, our fingers entwined, the warmth grounding us. Outside, the forest whispered its secrets, indifferent to our fears and triumphs. But inside, we knew one thing: no prank, no distance, no unseen terror could break the bond that had carried us through years of laughter and love. And for the first time that night, Ethan laughed softly, a fragile but genuine sound, breaking through the tension, reminding me that even miles away, even in fear, he had returned, truly, completely, home.